There is a story about a man who spent his entire life building a wall, brick by brick, stone by stone, until he stood trapped inside, unable to remember why he had built it in the first place. Imagine waking up one day and realizing the very ideas you defend, the philosophies you cling to, the truths you swear by, were never truly yours. What if the most dangerous philosophy in history isn't some forgotten doctrine or radical ideology, but the one unfolding silently in your mind right now, shaping your reality without your consent? This isn't just about thought. It's about the invisible architecture of belief, the way we construct entire worlds inside our heads and then mistake them for the truth. And today, we're going to unravel it, because what you're about to hear may unsettle you. It may shake the foundations of what you think you know, but it will also hand you the key to a freedom you've never dared to imagine. Before we continue, this type of video takes time and effort. If you enjoyed the content and want to support me, you can do so through Super Thanks. Thank you to everyone who appreciates the effort. Let's complete the journey. Think back to the last time you felt absolutely certain about something, a conviction so deep it felt like part of your bones. Now ask yourself, where did that certainty come from? Was it born from your own experience, your own questioning, or was it handed to you, absorbed like rainwater into soil without you even noticing? We like to believe we choose our beliefs, but the truth is far more unsettling. Most of what we call thinking is just replaying the whispers of others, the voices of parents, teachers, cultures, traumas, echoes so old we no longer recognize them as echoes. We mistake them for our own voice, and that is the danger. That is the silent philosophy unfolding inside us all, the one that convinces us we are free while keeping us chained to the past. Consider the child who grows up hearing, "The world is a dangerous place. Trust no one." That idea seeps into the marrow. It becomes the lens through which every relationship, every opportunity is viewed. Years later, the child, now an adult, can't understand why they sabotage love, why they flinch at kindness. They think it's instinct. They call it intuition, but it's not. It's a relic, a ghost of someone else's fear. And here's the most terrifying part. They will defend this fear as if it's wisdom. They will build entire lives around it. They will call it being realistic, never realizing they are living out a script written by a wound they don't even remember. This is the heart of the most dangerous philosophy in history, the one that goes unnamed, the one that convinces us we are thinking when we are only remembering, the one that dresses conditioning up as truth. And it's not just personal, it's collective. Look at history. Look at the wars fought over ideas no one questioned, the atrocities committed by people who believed they were righteous, the systems of oppression upheld by those who thought they were free. This is the power of unchallenged belief. It doesn't just shape individuals, it shapes civilizations. It builds empires and topples them. It starts revolutions and then strangles them in their crib, all while convincing everyone involved that they are acting of their own will. But there is a way out, and it begins with a single, devastating question. What if I'm wrong? Not just about small things, but about everything, about who you are, what you deserve, what's possible. What if the very core of your identity is built on borrowed pain? This question is a knife. It cuts through the chains, because the moment you entertain it, you open a door to a place where you are no longer a prisoner of your past, where you can finally meet yourself, Not the self you were told to be, not the self you had to become to survive, but the self that existed before the world got its hands on you. And this is where the real work begins, because seeing the chains is one thing, removing them is another. It requires something most people are terrified of: uncertainty, the willingness to stand in the void, to release the old stories without knowing what will replace them, to admit, if only to yourself, that you've been wrong, that you've been lied to, that you've lied to yourself. This is the price of true freedom, and few are willing to pay it. But for those who do, something extraordinary happens. The past loses its grip, the future becomes malleable, and you finally begin. There is a man sitting alone in a room he believes is the entire world, its walls the boundaries of reality itself, until one day he realizes with terrifying clarity that the room exists only because he has never questioned it, that the door was never locked but merely unopened, that the most dangerous philosophy isn't some grand ideological system, but the silent, unchallenged assumption that his confinement is natural. And as this realization shatters through him like lightning through dark water, he understands with equal parts horror and exhilaration that the room was never his prison, but his creation, that the walls were built from unquestioned beliefs handed down like heirlooms of limitation, that the air he breathes is thick with the dust of inherited fears, and now, with trembling hands reaching for the doorknob, he faces the ultimate rebellion, not the dramatic tearing down of walls, but the quiet, seismic shift of no longer believing in them, of recognizing that freedom wasn't something waiting beyond the door, but the very act of turning the handle, that the room's persistent reality depended entirely on his continued faith in its existence. And as the door swings open on silent hinges, he doesn't step into some new world, but simply awakens to the shocking truth that he had been free all along, that the entire architecture of his confinement was nothing more than thought solidified through time and unchallenged repetition. And now, breathing the unfiltered air of this realization, he faces the real question, not how to escape the room, but how to live, knowing it was never really there, how to move through a world where every wall, every barrier, every limitation reveals itself as nothing more than a whisper of his own hesitation, how to exist in this vastness without the comforting fiction of boundaries, how to bear the weight of infinite possibility pressing against his chest like a second heartbeat, how to reconcile that every law he thought governed existence was merely an agreement he'd forgotten he'd made. And as he stands there in the doorway, neither in nor out, but balanced perfectly in the threshold between what was and what could be, he understands that this is the true beginning, not of freedom, but of the terrifying responsibility that comes with it. The responsibility to choose, to create, to imagine without the safety net of imagined constraints, to finally accept that the room was never the problem, but the belief in it was, and that the most dangerous philosophy in history is the one we never think to question because it wears the disguise of the obvious, the given, the just how things are. And now, with that illusion burned away in the fire of this knowing, there is no going back, only forward into a world remade by the simple, irrevocable act of seeing through the walls that were never really there at all. And as the door creaks open, he doesn't find the vast expanse he expected. No blinding light, no promised land, just the quiet understanding that the room had always been empty, that the walls were made of nothing more substantial than his own need for boundaries, that the lock had always been on his side of the door. The realization doesn't come as a thunderclap, but as a slow unraveling, like mist dissolving in morning light, until all that remains is the simple, unbearable truth. He was never trapped, only convinced he should be. Now the real work begins, not in some grand departure, but in learning how to stand in this new awareness without rushing to build new walls, how to breathe in this unmapped space where every step is creation rather than confinement, where the only limits that remain are those he consciously chooses to keep. The most dangerous philosophy wasn't the room's existence, but his belief that he needed it to survive, and as that illusion falls away, he faces the most terrifying question of all. Not what lies beyond the door, but who will he become now that he knows he was always free?